Paramedics, I think, is here's what you want. If you're fucked up, you want like a 6-7 year guy. You don't want to.
What's the age range?
Doesn't matter. As long as they've been a paramedic for about 6-7 years, that's the sweet spot. You go over that, you got burnout, you got guys cutting corners. They're not maybe doing. Now, there's always exceptions. There's guys that have been paramedics 25 years that are still phenomenal paramedics. And there's guys that are real good right out of the gate. Most paramedics are not like me. Most paramedics are 50 pounds overweight, a healthy alcohol problem. They're, I'm only on wife 2. Usually paramedics are on 3 or 4 at this point. It's a disaster job. If you're going to do this job, you have to go in with your eyes open. You have to know, you have to meal plan. You have to bring your own food. You have to get a cooler. You have to put on the ambulance, because you are never going to see your station, and the firemen can cook dinner. They can do all those things. The cops can go out of service and get a decent meal, not paramedics. So all you end up doing is you get lazy. You don't make meal prep. So now what's your option? It's got to be fast food, or else you're not going to get your food before you get your next call, or you're eating trash hospital food. And then you're going home self-medicating because you're tired, you're stressed. So you booze, you're not working out. It's a terrible job unless you are very disciplined.
Welcome back to another episode of Pints and Professionals. I'm your host, Ramon Mejia. I capture photos and I create videos. So if you're ever in need, please let me know. I will be happy to assist you in that endeavor. Today's episode, I don't know how to describe it because it is that good. Will Adams was a former paramedic, and his life experience and his career experience is very informative I'll just say that. So without further ado, please welcome William. So, as I was saying earlier, I was having a few beverages with your extremely aggressive hugging brothers.
Oh yeah, extreme cuddling.
Yeah, extreme cuddling.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, Will is undoubtedly the hottest guy we have ever met. How does that make you feel?
That's ridiculous.
I think it's kind of true. You are hot. You're what's called a silver daddy, as some people would say.
Well, I'm warm, because of that really nice coat.
Yeah, which I'm going to throw that up on the video because it is a very cool picture. What were you doing? Do you remember the photo you took? It's on Instagram.
Oh, I had I had made a tomahawk.
Yeah,
and I was just, I think I was standing out on my deck with it. And my wife took that picture.
It was, it reminded me of like a photo that you would take at the Renaissance Fair or something very extravagant. But
yeah.
Do you do the Ren Fair?
I went once with the kids, and years ago, the one in kind of near College Station.
Oh yeah, I forget what that one's called.
And I didn't dress up. I thought it was for kids, So I just went, and I'll never do that again. Like, if I ever go back, I'm going to do a full costume because I felt like an asshole. I was like in board shorts and a t-shirt, and everyone else is in like cool costumes. And
they do it. I mean, they do it big.
Yeah,
you definitely feel out of place if you're dressed in like regular civilian clothes.
And you can the people that work there, so you can camp there, I guess, at night.
You can, yeah.
And if you check out the people that work there, they get up to some shit after hours. Like, it's going to get weird and it's going to get cool. And I think that I want to go back without kids
and have fun.
And drink a lot of mead and get into a fight with an orc or something.
Right. So, how did you meet the crew, the Brian, the Jason, and the CJ? Oh,
I met them through jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu. How long have you been doing that for?
I've been training jiu-jitsu since 2007, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
7 or 8.
All right.
Yeah.
What got you into it?
I owned a bar, and I had a bouncer that worked for me that trained, and he would tell me about it. And one day I'm standing outside the bar, and these 3 guys walk by, big dudes, kind of overweight guys, but big guys.
Yeah.
And some words were passed with my partner, my business partner, and them. And they kind of turn around and start walking back. And I was like, oh, these guys want to fight. So I opened the door to the bar and I go, hey, Jeremiah, come out here and show me that jujitsu.
Let them hug it out. Yeah, let's hug it out real quick.
He like, the one guy kind of went for him. He kind of just took him down somehow. And the guy rolled over onto his arms and legs to kind of stand back up. And he just kind of pulled one arm across his body and just punched him in the face a few times. And it was just an ass kicking. And I was like, all right, I'll go try this out.
So this is kind of, you owned a bar.
Yeah.
How long did that last?
5 years.
Okay.
I was 25.
All right. So Jesus, there's so many different tangents that I could go off in this episode, just because I've heard so many different stories from Brian and CJ and how awesome of a dude you are. So let's go all the way back. So where were you born?
I was born in a hospital near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And your dad's from Zimbabwe.
My dad's from Zimbabwe. He was born. I think in those days they would sort of fly back to England to give birth. But he was raised in Zim, and he left before the revolution. I think it was like 1974, 1975. He went to university at Oxford. And then moved to the States pretty quickly after that.
Okay. Mom
was born in England, raised in England.
A red coat.
Yep, fully English. She's 5'2" and drinks tea,
Wow.
And makes crumpets.
And they came to the United States?
Yeah, in 75.
Okay.
No, they came in 76 because my sister was born in 75 in England. And I was born here in 77.
Does she have dual citizenship? Or
we all do, yeah.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm learning. God, every second that goes by, I'm learning so much about you, man. So growing up in Philadelphia, what was that like?
God, it was the 80s, It was like you just kind of went outside when it got light and came back when it got dark.
Okay.
You would run away a lot. There's a lot of running away from people.
Like real running away? Like, oh, Mom, Dad, I don't like your rules.
No, like you'd be wandering around with your buddy, and then like you'd run into some older kids, and you would just run away because they would chase you. And if they caught you, they like give you a wedgie or whatever.
You're going to get beaten.
Yeah, so yeah, you had to. I was telling my kids, I was like, you kids never run away. You're never scared of anything. Like when I was a kid, I was out in the woods or in the city and getting chased by like scary dudes.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I got kids of my own now, and it is weird the stuff they do compared to the stuff I did.
At different times, right?
Yeah.
Times kind of make people evolve in different ways. Is that good or bad?
I don't think until they grow up into adults and start fucking the world up. So we'll see, I guess.
What did your parents do for work?
My dad, he died about 10 years ago. He was a economist. So he went to Oxford, and in those, I think it's still the case in England or in Oxford when he studied economics, but you don't just study economics. You study economics, philosophy, and politics. So it's called a PPE, is his philosophy, politics, and economics.
Okay.
And then he worked for Chase, a branch of Chase Bank that did economic forecasts, I think. And then he started his own company when I was probably 11 or 12. A management consultant for mining companies mostly. And he was very rarely home. He kind of traveled a lot. But it was cool because, when he first started his business, we didn't have any money. We would have like kerosene heaters in our house and stuff. And we were just like, it was super dangerous, but he traveled so much. He had all these miles. So like he died 10 years ago. I started paying for plane tickets probably 5 years ago.
Wow.
Because he had millions and millions and millions of air miles. So I would just, if I wanted to go anywhere ever in my life, I would just call him up, be like, I want to go to like St. Louis. He's like, sure, here's the code. because he just had more than he could ever spend. It took our entire family 5 years to spend it all after he died.
Well, that's cool. You get to go travel for free pretty much anywhere. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was very cool.
What did mom do?
Mom, she's, back then, just stay-at-home mom.
Okay. I'm sure taking care of you was probably
they didn't really take care of us. They just let us outside.
We'll let the streets handle them.
They gave us weapons. Like, I remember when I was a kid, they were just like, it's your birthday. Here's a bow and arrow.
Again, different times. Holy
yeah,
shit.
like, and it's a, it's not a strong bow and arrow, but you could definitely kill someone with it.
Is that kind of why you're into crafting tools and metalworking? And
I think when as a kid I would make swords and shit out of like sticks, and now that I'm an adult with means, I can make them out of metal now.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. So growing up, what kind of jobs were you doing? What was your first real job where you got like a W-2 in the mail? Or
I worked on a dairy farm.
Milking cows?
Yeah, because we moved out of the city into a very rural community in a town called Phoenixville, which is an old steel mill town outside of that town. So it was just, farm fields and into this old farmhouse that was built in like 1790.
Okay.
And so I worked on a dairy farm and through like from like 8th grade till 11th grade. And then I started working for a construction, like a new construction plumber. So I did a lot of like digging ditches and plumbing. And but I can drive a tractor. I know how to milk a cow, make yogurt, that kind of thing.
Yoplait or like Greek yogurt?
Like, Stonyfield, that brand?
Yeah.
They were our main competitor.
Okay.
Because it was like all natural, organic yogurt.
So working on the dairy farm, did you have to take care of the animals?
Mm-hmm.
Was that kind of like a precursor to becoming a EMT?
Bar owner? No. No, the EMT thing didn't happen for a while. I got like CPR certified.
Okay.
Because I worked at a camp as a counselor one summer, and they asked, could I go get certified to be a lifeguard because they needed lifeguards. So I took that class, and I remember liking it, and I was just like, this is cool. So I was a lifeguard. Did they have you dive down, grab a brick, and
Yeah, it was like what was the process to becoming a lifeguard? Because I failed out of lifeguard school. It was terrible at it.
When I did it, it was like you did first aid CPR class, which was in a classroom.
Okay,
and that was like a day, and then you went to a pool, and you had to like be able to swim down and back, and like do like a victim toe, I think, and like maybe pick a weight off the ground. Maybe it was like, but it was like an 8-foot deep pool. It wasn't like,
dude, that's still deep, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's nothing compared to like what I ended up doing, but
that's very true.
I could swim deep. I never was on a swim team or anything, so I wasn't good at swimming, but I could not die in the water.
But, so what got you here to Texas? We can flash forward to that point.
So, I was working for a company called Remote Medical International. I was a paramedic, and I was going out to weird places all over the world and providing medical support for oil exploration, or I worked on a salvage vessel. I had all the Coast Guard certifications and everything.
So, what did you feel like you had a knack of addressing emergency situations and kind of solving the problems?
Yeah, I mean,
like, when did you feel comfortable in those? Or I guess, what drew you to that line of work?
Well, I tell you, I was planning on going to law school when I owned my bar. I was sick of the bar, and I was thinking of something to do. And I think the reason I wanted to go to law school is because when you own a bar, people sue you all the time. And I was like, I like to fight, Brian. And I'm going to have to learn this way of fighting because it would piss you off. You get these letters, and you're like, "What, this motherfucker?" So you're like, "I'm gonna be a lawyer." So I went and I took the LSATs, and I was going to apply to all these law schools. And I was sitting having lunch with my lawyer, Steve, in New Mexico, and another friend of mine who was a paramedic. And at the time, I was an EMT because I volunteered at the fire department, and I worked ski patrol. And that was the only reason I became an EMT, because I wanted to do ski patrol and have the pass. And he was like,
go after the snow bunnies. I get it.
Yeah, it was pretty rich environment, And my lawyer, Steve, was like, hey, man, I just do homework for a living. And it's boring and you're going to hate it. And then my other friend was like, you seem to be really happy when we're running calls at the fire department. Why don't you do that? It was literally, I was sitting there, we were at a Chinese restaurant, and I was like, you know what? You're right. And I went home and I told my ex, I was like, I'm not going to go to law school. I'm going to be a paramedic. And I asked my buddy, where should I go to be a paramedic to get experience, And he said, go to Oakland, California. So that's where I went.
You went to Oakland, where they are very... how would you describe Oakland? What year was that?
It's Philadelphia, but it's always nice weather.
Okay. What year did you go to Oakland?
That would be 2009.
Okay. All right. When you were, I hate to say boots on the ground, but when you landed in Oakland, what was the situation like?
I just drove there.
Okay.
In a car. It was the first culture shock was I went to get my truck registered, and it cost $600. And I go,
California's going to California.
I was like, why is it $600? And they're like, because you don't have a fuel efficient vehicle. And at the time, you could buy a fuel efficient vehicle if you were rich. But and I remember thinking like, Jesus Christ, this is just a tax on poor people. Like every poor person I know has a shitbox truck and has to pay $600. And every rich person I know has a sweet efficient car and they only have to pay, probably $300. That was the first thing, and I was like, "Oh, God damn it!"
And that was probably the most shocking thing you've seen up to that point, right?
Yeah. We lived in a bad neighborhood in West Oakland, kind of on the Emeryville border at the time. And
describe bad. What's bad?
Like you could hear gunshots at night.
Okay.
And
helicopters circling around.
Yeah, it was just constant sirens.
Yeah.
And then when I started working, it was like, "Oh, okay, this is a terrible area." Not the worst area, but it was, it was pretty bad. Yeah. But I actually didn't mind. I love the weather. It was kind of a fun town to be in. Culturally, I didn't really love it.
Yeah.
Just because everyone was so sensitive. And East Coast, and I owned a bar. I was kind of like a handful. So a lot of people got offended.
Yeah, I tend to notice that Philadelphia people, at least from the fan base, they're very abrasive and very passionate in some sense.
Yeah,
so I get the passion. Well,
there are a lot of assholes.
that too.
I went back and maybe in 2006. I went back and I just forgot how everyone just yells at each other. You crossing the road, you'll see a guy crossing the road, and a car will go near, and he'll just like hit the hood of the car and be like, "Fuck you," and the guy "Fuck you" back, and just drives away, and
that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
So when you arrive in Oakland, what was it like what was the process of becoming an EMT?
Well, you gotta go to EMT school. And then you get
How long is that?
EMT school's nothing. It's like a semester.
That's it.
Yeah, just basic EMT.
Do you need like a biology degree or a bachelor's?
No.
You need nothing.
Yeah, an EMT is a basic medical provider. So you can do basic bandaging, splinting. There's a few medications typically you can give, like albuterol or epi for like anaphylaxis, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then in paramedic is usually a 1 or 2 year process.
What's the difference?
So a paramedic is someone, they can do a lot more. So we can, a lot of cardiac medications. They can do cardiac pacing, defibrillation, when people go into cardiac arrest, medications that are delivered via IV over drips,
right?
Vents, depending on the service you work for, you may have more or less ability. It's called protocols. Like in Austin, very advanced protocols. In some rural areas, pretty advanced because of the long travel distances.
Sure. Yeah.
And then like California is like terrible. There's like 15 things you can do, and that's it.
Oh, wow.
Because the state Senate, like the lawmakers set the protocol, where in Texas it's the doctor you work for. So if my medical director wants to let me do open heart surgery, he's allowed to do that.
Okay.
I mean, he'll get sued and go to jail, but.
So you go to Oakland to become or you're an EMT.
I'm already an EMT with her. Yeah.
Day one, what's it like for you?
Well, you can't, in those days, you couldn't just go work for a 911 ambulance. You have to go, they call it do your time, doing inter-facility transports.
That's comforting to know. That I thought you just get, for whatever the duration of your schooling, and then, all right, here you go. Let's go see
well,
some
now
lives.
It's like that.
Oh,
back then it wasn't. They wouldn't hire you unless you had experience.
Yeah.
So I went and got a job at a transport company, and basically you just take people to dialysis.
Okay.
And, people who can't walk, you go to their house, you pick them up, put them in the ambulance, drive them to dialysis. They get dialysized, and you bring them home.
Got it.
Or someone does.
And was there any, there wasn't anything trivial you were doing as an EMT in Oakland? Is that right? Or
oh, it's all nonsense. I mean, most of what. Yeah, so when I did facility stuff, it was taking people to the doctor, taking people to and we used to do this thing they would call a code 2. So in public safety, code 3 is like sirens. Code 1 is you're good, you're just driving. Well, in California, we had a thing called code 2, which was like these nursing homes would call us and be like, well, this person needs to go see a doctor, but it's not a 911 emergency, but it's also not scheduled.
Okay.
But the reality was, if they had more than a certain number of 911 calls in a month, they would get investigated by the state.
Okay.
So they would just call us to take the people to. So you would arrive, and I got to the point where I would walk in the room with the phone in my hand and like a blood pressure cuff, be like, what's going on? Because they would give you the sickest people. Like, I would walk in and this person would be about to die. And I would be like, this is not what I should not be here. I need to call someone. And then I would just call 911 and be like, you need to send an ambulance and someone who knows what they're doing. So we had a lot. In fact, I had a guy call. So I worked for a company called Royal Ambulance. I think they still exist. And we got a call. Our dispatchers call us on our phone. They're like, hey, we need you to go to this house. And I show up at this house, and it's very unclear what was going on. And this guy was like, oh, yeah, she's in here. And he brings us in. And I have my phone in my hand. And it's the bathroom. And this woman is just stabbed, like bleeding stabbed. And he had just opened the phone book to ambulance and called like us. And I was like, unprepared on every level, because I think this guy stabbed her.
Right. Yeah. You think you're walking in a crime scene.
And now I'm
point.
stuck in a house with potentially a murderer and like a bleeding person. So it was stuff like that would happen a lot.
Yeah.
Which was wild.
Right.
And then when I started working 911, you're in that mindset. So you're like, what's this? And you get police with you or whatever. You're a little smarter about it.
So when when do you transition into becoming a paramedic?
You got to go to paramedic school. And then when I left paramedic school, I got my, I just went to a 911 paramedic job.
Why did you make that transition? Because the EMT was too boring?
Yeah, you want to like move up, you
Sure,
want to,
okay.
It's a raise, a significant raise,
Okay.
and promotion, and it's kind of like what I wanted to do.
During paramedic school, what are some, how long is that?
It depends on the school. Most of them are about a year or two, depending on how frequently you go. Like ACC has a paramedic program. I think it's 2 years long.
Got it.
There are mills out there, they call them. So you'll do it for like 6 months, but you'll go 4 days a week for 8 hours a day. And they kind of teach you to pass the tests.
Yeah.
They don't make great paramedics, but no school really does. You become good when you go out and work.
So is there any intro into real life situations as a paramedic? Or is it just like on the job training? During paramedic school, you will go and do your clinical internship. So you'll shadow somebody.
So you're doing everything. So you just have a guy that knows what they're doing with you in case you fuck something up. So you'll go on a call and like someone's having a heart attack or whatever, and you're like, incorrectly you think that maybe they're just a little sick and they'll be okay if you give them some cough syrup and leave. And that guy's there to tell you, no, this dude's having a heart attack. You need to treat him.
Now, what was day one like as a paramedic?
Like the first time I was on my own?
Yes, yeah. Scared?
Uneventful. I didn't know, because I worked at the time. I was working with a fire department, so they had like I'm the paramedic in the transport unit, but the guy I worked with was a paramedic. Yeah. 2 of the 4 guys on the engine were paramedics, so I was never alone. In the beginning, I always worked with what they call an ALS fire department. It's like firefighters that are also paramedics. So there was always people there to get your back.
There was a support system for you.
You're never like totally
they're not throwing you to the world.
In Austin, it's BLS fire, so you're often on your own in Austin.
Really? Okay. Yeah. When during that time, when was the first moment you're like, this is some bad shit that we're dealing with?
My first like bad call.
Yeah.
We rolled up. I don't remember what it came out as, like a auto ped or something. We came out, and I remember coming over a hill.
What's auto ped? Sorry to interrupt.
Automobile versus pedestrian.
Oh.
So we come over a hill, and there's a truck kind of across the road, and I just see like a kid laying on the ground, and I'm like, this was my first, for me, it was my first call like that.
Yeah.
A lot of pressure, and I was like, oh Jesus, and but like everyone's different. Some people react differently. I always sort of, when situations like that happens, I just become extremely focused.
Sure.
And I guess that's good for that line of work. So,
right.
Ended up working out. We saved the kid.
Yeah. In situations like that, how do you train for that? How do you get, well, more importantly, how do you find people to deal with those situations?
It's a good question. It's difficult, and EMS agencies have a problem with recruiting, and especially with retention. A lot of people think they want to be paramedics or EMTs, and they discover that they do not actually want to be paramedic EMTs. And I can tell, I've been doing it a long time, and I've been a trainer for a long time, and people come in, and I always ask, like, why'd you want to be a paramedic? Like you're asking me, and they'll go, I just want to help people. And they're not just saying it because that's what you're supposed to say in your interview. I can tell when they really, really want to help people. Yeah. And those people will last maybe 6 months.
That's the kind of thing with my wife. She's a wound care nurse, and every day she's dealing with situations that I could never fathom. And I just want to, I want to understand, how do you, because it takes special people to, be in society to help solve the situations, which aren't a daily occurrence. And we don't, as civilians, we don't ever see those problems. So it's like, it is a need. And I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, as populations grow, as society grows, we need more of those individuals to handle those emergency situations. And I'm trying to wrap my head around, how do you train for that type of stuff?
Well, you can train like procedures, right? So you can say, oh, this is a trauma call. So that's any kind of trauma you can think of. You fell, you got hit by a car, you got shot by a gun, you got stabbed, whatever. And there's a system to get through that call, right? You're going to, depending on what era you're working in, like nowadays they use something called a March assessment. So everything's an acronym, and that comes from the military. And it's like, it used to be ABC, right? Airway, breathing, circulation. That was the order in which you would solve problems. So, oh, is this person breathing? No, they're not. Okay, I'm going to fix that first, and then I'm going to move on to, are they breathing? If they're not breathing, I'm going to start bagging them, and then are they bleeding? And I'll stop that. Now they reversed it. Now it's, you address the hemorrhage first, the airway last, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So you train that way, and then you can kind of apply it to whatever situation you're in, and then it's different for medical calls.
But how do you train for, like, the other day I was, my wife was bringing some reading material of her job, I guess, to some coworkers. And this was at 6 a.m. And I had just so happened to get up. I got my coffee and I looked at her lunch pail and the reading material there. I'm like, all right, my curiosity's got me. I opened the book and it was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, this is at 6:30 a.m. and this is what my wife deals with on a daily basis as soon as she goes into work. How do you teach an individual to deal with that type of grotesqueness. I don't.
So
like, how do you find those individuals?
I can tell you how.
Please, yeah,
how
elaborate
it worked
on
for me.
Yeah,
And it's like kind of like a Slumdog Millionaire situation, where I smoked cigarettes for 10 years, so I can't smell. Now, that's
healthy.
That's nothing.
That's a healthy way to do a job.
Your wife can tell you there is nothing more disgusting smelling on earth than those wound pumps. When those things spill,
yeah,
it is horrific smell. The other dark secret of EMS, especially, and probably nursing, is you mostly deal with poop.
They call it a code brown, I believe.
You get a lot of those. I mean, I've seen some interesting poop.
I mean, come on, I've seen some interesting poop too. But
all right, tell me I'll tell you the most interesting one I ever saw, and I love this, and it's a couple of things. So we have 6th Street here, and college kids get real drunk, and
you don't say.
One day we pick up this girl who, just paralyzed drunk, like just unconscious on the sidewalk. And something that happens to college girls and young girls is their clothes require active participation to stay on, right? So if you go unconscious and you're not constantly pulling up the top and pulling down the bottom, it just migrates to the middle. Okay. So we get there, and this chick is just unconscious. We put her name, and so I'm a salty veteran at this point, so I know what's up. So I put this big yellow sheet down first. Then the fireman put her on there, and I'm like, all right, we're good. We get her in the back, and I'm at the head, right? And I'm doing something. I think it wasn't even my call; it was my partner's call. So I'm probably on the tablet or something. I'm standing in the ambulance. I'm looking down. And he jumps back, and she goes to vomit. Well, a lot of times when they go to vomit, it comes out both ends.
Yo.
Well, she must have been wearing like a string thong because it split the stream, and it was diarrhea. And I'd never seen anything like it in my goddamn life. 2 perfect jets of shit come flying out of this girl. It was amazing.
Okay, all right, you went on that one.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know. Yeah, I can say I've never done that before. I've never worn a thong before, so
no.
I think you got me beat.
Most people haven't shit themselves. I mean, I would argue probably they have, but
you haven't met my friends yet.
Yeah.
Well, you met Brian. I don't think he's shit himself.
It doesn't seem like the sort of guy that shits himself.
So as you're going through this stint in Oakland, how do you deal with all the situations that you're being involved in? Like, how do you process it? Because I'm sure you've seen a lot of bad shit.
Yeah, so everyone says all the things that are, you gotta talk it out or drink or whatever. There's a million things to do, but at the end of the day, for me, I'm quite good at compartmentalizing. I can see terrible things, and I can put it away. It's never been a problem for me. So I never got that kind of like PTSD type stuff that some people get. I got extremely tired, which is, when you work 24-hour shifts and you're constantly getting up. I mean, we're not even allowed to do that to terrorists, and they do it to us constantly all night.
Well, I think it's because you're so valued. Like, everyone needs you. There's emergencies constantly going on.
But they're not emergencies. The thing is, they're very rarely emergencies.
Right. But that's, and one of the ways that I've known my wife to kind of deal with it is the dark humor. So you have to kind of find the humor in it. Otherwise, it's going to, eat you alive.
We joke terrible jokes. If there was a recording so you ever notice how there's no good shows about paramedics? There's awesome shows about cops.
There was that one movie with Nick Cage.
Bringing Out the Dead?
Yeah.
That's like the only one.
I need to watch that one.
And that's a great one.
Yeah.
And it is good. And it was written by a guy who was a paramedic for 10 years in New York. But the reason there's no good shows is because it would have to be on like HBO. And you'd have to ride out with some surly medics for a while and because it's the part that would be entertaining is the horrific humor.
Yeah.
There were these two cops, right, in Austin. They got fired, or they got in a lot of trouble. I forget what, but they left their body cameras on, and they were sitting in their car after they had just run on this girl had been raped, and they were in the car afterwards, and they were just talking shit, and they were like, "Yeah, who would want to rape her?" Kind of thing, like dumb jokes. Yeah. And when the lawyers pulled the tapes to look at, like the defense lawyer, whatever, they leaked the extra stuff, which I think is bullshit. But these guys got just shanghaied for that. And if you put a recording in an ambulance, everyone would be fired. And you let the public hear the stuff we say about people is terrible.
I laugh because it seems like it's the only reprieve you guys get throughout your hellacious day and night. Yeah. And like, if that's the worst thing that you guys do out of doing a good job, all right, that's fine. I think I take a lot from your stories, but most importantly, my wife, and I bring it into my day. And the problems that I'm involved in is nowhere near some of the problems that you and my wife have dealt with. And I feel like people would have a better understanding of situations and be a little bit more patient with things if they understood what you guys are doing. So how do you see society evolving throughout your life? I know that's a really weird question, but what I'm saying is, like, we get because of our cell phone, we get all the bad news in our face all day, every day.
Sure. And
that can evolve into something, that makes people very sad. But if they heard stories like yours and my wife's, I feel like, yeah, that's not that bad. What I'm seeing is bad, but in my own daily life, it's not that. It doesn't have any substance, So I get, yeah, go ahead.
So what I've noticed in my career has been a significant increase in two things: anxiety, young people especially. So one of the questions we ask every time we run a call, you're dealing with a patient, you get a medical history, you find out what medicines they take, and the majority of young people are on anti-anxiety medicines, which is weird to me. And I wonder what causes that. We can have tons of theories about that. The other thing is loneliness. And I see it all the time. During COVID, especially, because people weren't allowed to go to bars and stuff, they would just start drinking in their houses and end up days, and then we would get called. And I would go into these apartments, and it was just some guy who just, without the ability to go have lunch, or, their only social exchange with other humans was happy hour or whatever, that got taken away, and they just fell apart. It was brutal. So that's the biggest thing I noticed. And people also don't seem to, now at the risk. So, when you're a bartender, everyone's a drunk asshole. Yeah, when you're a medic, everyone's a complete useless person who can't solve any problem on their own, have to call 911. So it's kind of the same thing. So I don't want to make it sound like, so all the people I'm running on, that's what I've been noticing. I'm sure there's lots of people out there that aren't anxious and are fine. I just don't meet them.
I know I was in a situation the other day where a camera wasn't recording, and the entire time I was like panicking, but in the back of my head, I'm like, there's a situation in Gaza where, people are dying. My wife is probably dealing with like family that is losing, a very young child. So it's like, all right, Ramon, what you're dealing with right now isn't that bad. Just figure it out and solve it. And life will go on. You're not going to die because of the situation. No one's going to die because of your problem.
Yeah. Everyone could benefit from some perspective, I think.
Yeah. So when did you leave Oakland to come to Texas?
I did. I went to Washington to work for RMI.
Okay.
And then I was overseas for a couple of years doing that. And I had a kid, and my wife at the time was like, you need to stop being in Africa and come back here. So I was like, well, I don't want to live in Washington. It's rainy and sucks.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to either.
Okay.
And so I go, what city you want to live in? And she goes, I like Austin, Texas. And I Googled Austin, Texas EMS, found their site. They were hiring. and their hiring closed that day. So I called and I said, "Hey, I'm going to overnight this. Will you take my application?" And they said, "Yeah."
What were you doing in Africa?
My last deployment was a oil exploration or seismic research company.
Okay.
So we were on a ship
and
off the coast of Somalia, and we would fire these big air cannons in the water, and the sound goes through the mantle, and they find oil, I guess. And I was the medic for all these vessels. So there was a main vessel, and there was like 5 support vessels, and all the security people because of the pirates. And I was just the medic for everybody.
Did you see any pirates?
Oh yeah, we saw them. They
any
sort
Jack
of
Sparrows.
They'll come, and not the Jack Sparrow ones. They'll sort of like drive towards you, right? And we have a bunch of vessels doing work, and so there's people are supposed to stay like 5 miles away.
Yeah,
because we're working, and we have all this gear that's hanging out the back of the ship that's like a kilometer long. And so you get on the radio and you go away. We're working, and they never have radio, so they just keep coming, and they're pirates. And so then the security guy will walk out onto the helicopter deck and just hold like a rifle over his head. Okay. And they'll drive away because it's very difficult to board a ship while it's moving.
Sure.
That recently that Navy SEAL died in training trying to get on, and the seas were like 4-foot seas, and that's super dangerous. And it's just one of those things. So if someone actually sees you coming and can shoot at you with a rifle on a stable platform like a ship, he's going to kill all of you before you get close. So they try to come at night, but at night it's even more dangerous. And we had round the clock security. So
any interesting injuries that people sustained on them?
Yeah. So I got called to one of the vessels, one of the support vessels that would come and go from Pemba or whatever port they were near and bring supplies out to us. And it was a Norwegian vessel. And they're like, "Hey, you need to come over here. The guys are sick." And I go over there, and they all have STDs. And I was like, they all went to the same hooker. And I'm like, I got these guys.
So they were really dipping their pen in Company Ink.
Well, these guys are idiots. I was like, you guys know that 100% of African prostitutes have like HIV? You know that, right?
The bad stuff.
And they didn't give a shit. Like, the one thing is awesome about sailors the world over is they're all exactly the same, and they're complete scumbags. And I just love them. But yeah, they all went to the same hookers and got STDs and ran through all my azithromycin pretty quick. So
you were treating them for... You've seen a lot of dicks.
A lot of dicks. A lot of vomit, poop.
Did they not know about like prophylactics and ways to prevent those?
Sailors, man. They don't care. They're just.
Right. So you do that, and then you come back, and you don't want to go to Washington, so you come to Austin. Now, did Oakland prepare you for? Because from what I hear on the news, Oakland is like a really crime-ridden city. Did that prepare you for?
Yeah, I mean,
did that give you an education?
It got me good at trauma because it was shootings and stabbings a lot. But they're also extremely hostile towards public safety in Oakland, in California. I don't know about the rest of California, but in Oakland, like, people would get mad at us all the time. They assume that you're not treating them well because, or you're treating them worse than you would another person.
Like the victims? Or
yeah, the people you're treating, their family members get mad at you. It was weird. And I thought that's how it was. And then I came here, and one thing about Texas is people are super polite and nice to you when you're a fireman or a medic. And I did not get that. And it changed, after BLM movement, there was more hostility in general. And, and some of that came to us, which I don't get. We're here to help, whatever.
In dealing with Oakland situation, what do you think facilitates that type of mindset? What is it? Not trusting the government, not trusting professional services, poor education, poor economy, all of the above.
Yeah.
How do you address that? How do you fix that problem?
So ideally, you just stay professional.
Sure.
Don't get emotional. Now, what really happens is you're on your 16th call in 24 hours. You're tired. Someone says the wrong shit to you. You just fly off the handle.
Sure. Yeah. You have a human emotional reaction to something. Yeah.
So, I mean, I have flown off the handle at people, I don't know, countless times in my career.
Sure, and that's reasonable. But I'm guessing in trying to address the underlying issue of all this crime and shootings and stuff, what do you think would be the best approach to resolving that issue? Is it? Yeah, I know we're going deep, but I want to ask this question because you saw it day in and day out, and I feel like there's a particular governor in that state of California that is out of touch. And my brother has some strong feelings towards him, but it just seems like it's like we need people like you who have been in this situation to kind of maybe give an opinion at least of like, what do you solve the crime in those areas?
I think I can speak generally, right?
Sure,
and so from like a leadership perspective, when you want your people to do the thing you want them to do, you have to explain to them and convince them that it's in their best interest to do it, right? Like, so I need to get you on board, right? I think in our culture, there's a ton of people who are unconvinced that being part of society is the best thing for them. Mm-hmm. And they think that maybe operating outside of that, or, being antisocial, for however that manifests, whether it's, gangbangers or just random crime or petty theft, whatever, it's all antisocial behavior, right? So I think we need to get people convinced that being part of society is a good thing and it will benefit them. And how do you do that? No idea. That would be, if someone could figure that out, that would be awesome. But I think that's probably it. You got to give people hope that they can improve their situation if they do the things you ask them to do. And I think a lot of these people, maybe they tried to do the thing and they just got shit on, and they're like, well, fuck it, I'll just do this other thing. Yeah. And that makes sense to me. These people, like in economics, there's this theory that every person will act in what they perceive as their best interests at all times. And it's pretty true, unless you're like a psychopath or something. But that's a very small percentage of people,
So as you made your move from Oakland to Austin, what was, I guess, from a red tape standpoint, what were some of the differences between working in Oakland versus working here in Texas?
People in Texas have a lot more respect for public safety. They're polite. It has been a pleasure to work here. I really have no complaints. And obviously we deal with the majority of the calls I dealt with in at least the latter part of my career where I was downtown was homeless people. And, they can get under your skin for sure.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if I see someone with a bone sticking out of their leg, I know, like, okay, this is a problem. Like, I'm going to solve it. This is what I'm here for. Homeless people have the equivalent of that, except it's in their head. And for some reason, we don't treat it. I don't know why we, as a society, we chose to do this. I'm not like a bleeding heart for homeless, but they're there because they are junkies and they're crazy. There is no such thing as a sane, non-drug addicted, bush living homeless person. There are people who are down on their luck, and maybe they're in a shelter or a halfway house or something like that, but they're not living in the bushes. The ones that are living in the bushes that we saw when they let everyone camp on the street, those people have serious progressive mental illness and drug addiction, and they need to be taken, maybe by force and treated.
But that would go against their Fourth Amendment, right?
That is illegal in this country. So there was I forget the Supreme Court ruling. You're not allowed to, you basically can't do that. And without a significant, like, you'd have to get people to take away make them children, basically. There's a way you can do it, but it's extremely difficult.
And I think that's kind of what I was alluding to in the difference between working in Oakland versus working in Texas. What were some of the differences in city ordinances in Oakland versus here in
they would
Travis
give
County?
Homeless people cash
in Oakland.
In California. Oh. It was like weekly or monthly. They would just line up and they would give them green money, and then it would be our busiest it would go in these phases. Yeah. As soon as you get these guys cash, the calls go through the roof because they're robbing each other. They're beating the shit out of each other. They're buying all the booze and drugs, and they're getting hammered and passing out and all the things. It's wild that they think that that's a good way to approach this problem.
So how do you go from like helping versus enabling in that specific situation in Oakland? You obviously you wouldn't enable them you wouldn't enable them by giving them money, right?
Yeah. As medics, we didn't really have any power to do anything except take them to the hospital. We call it the circle of life. What happens is some homeless guy takes shit outside your Starbucks, and they're like, well, they call 911. And
good. I hate Starbucks.
This guy's taking a shit outside my Starbucks. And usually the guy on the phone wants the cops to come and get rid of this dude. But what happens is the cops don't really have anything to do with it, and the fire department, no one's on fire. So the next thing is medics. So we end up being this catch-all for like a lot of shit. So we show up, and this guy needs to go away. Yeah. So we're going to take him where we take people, which is the emergency room. They go to the waiting room. They act out in the waiting room, and hospital security kicks them out. And then they go back to the street. So it's like this circle, and nothing gets treated, nothing gets helped. But we move them from in front of that Starbucks where they took the shit. And they all wander back eventually, and we'll go back and get them a second time.
It's like a rinse and repeat type method, and that doesn't seem like it's really solving the problem.
It's definitely not solving the problem. Now, you get systems like Austin, Travis County EMS, where they actually try to address those issues, and they start initiatives, and we have community health paramedics, and a lot of they work with the homeless outreach people and the police, and they try to get as many of these guys off the street and solve their problems. Like a lot of these guys don't have IDs, they can't get jobs because they don't have IDs, so they help them get IDs, they help them get on their feet, and help them get on their meds, whatever they need. So there is, people shit on like liberal. Like my mom lives in Washington. She'll be like, oh, Texas is so Republican and all this stuff. I've worked all over this country. This state takes care of people better than California, better than New Mexico, better than Pennsylvania. This is a good state to live in.
That's interesting that you would say that, because from online, that's not the directive or the storyline that I'm seeing. No. Now, in regards to the homeless issue that we're having and you dealing with that situation, I remember being 25, 26. I'm like, God, I hate all these homeless. Why can't they just get their lives together? Why can't they just, not be in front of my favorite, convenience store? And then as I got older, I became, not as hardened and I understand, the hardships of life. And these individuals don't really have a support system because, it's very easy for any individual to fall into life situations to where you just can't be a part of society, and then mix that with a rampant fentanyl issue and all that stuff. So how, in your mind, how do you how do you reduce the problem that is homelessness? Do we house them? Do we pay for the apartments and give them that?
Like magic wand? I can do whatever I want?
What's the magic wand approach by Will?
So they need what's called wraparound services. So they need to be off the street.
Yep.
They need to be off the drugs, and they need to be treated for their mental illness. So you can't just give them a house. Like they did this tiny home village.
Yeah.
Okay. But now you just put a bunch of crazy junkies together, and that doesn't do anything. You got to give them the medicine and the help. So I would literally round them up, put them in a facility, treat them for their illness, which is what they have. They have mental illness. They have drug addiction.
But Will, I don't want my tax dollars to go to that, because where's the ROI on that?
Well, there is no. Well, I'll tell you what it is. Go to Switzerland and hang out in Zurich and tell me how many homeless people you see and junkies. It'll be zero because it's against the law.
Well, but also they have a pretty stringent, immigration policy, and it's very hard to get out.
Our homeless people aren't foreigners.
Sure, that's true. Okay, fair
so
point.
As a percentage of the population, you're going to have X amount of crazy, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
These guys are, you're not allowed to be a homeless junkie in Switzerland. They don't put you in jail. They treat you, but they force you to get treatment.
But that also, I mean, it costs money to treat one
Absolutely.
individual.
But guess what? Remember when they were camping everywhere in Austin?
Oh, dude, yeah.
Did you like that?
No, I didn't.
Well, that's
Thanks,
where your tax
Rick
dollars are going.
Kassar.
And by the way, they're still here. They're
Yeah.
just back in the bushes.
They retreated back into the shadows where you can't see
If
them.
you want a fun game, get yourself a drone and go
I have one.
go behind like a Walmart where there's a wooded area and fly that drone up, and you will see vast villages in the woods.
Well, now you put ideas in my head.
Yeah.
But so in your mind, was there a common underlying issue in the individuals that you were treating that were homeless? Was it alcoholism? Was it opioid abuse?
All roads lead back to mental illness.
Okay.
Yeah, there are very few. There's a few. I can think of a couple guys over the years that were like just drunks. And they were not crazy. They were just real bad drunks, and they live outside. And that's like, there's a few. And they're usually what they call frequent flyers. We run on them all the time because they'll just be passed out somewhere and they'll call. But those are not super common.
Interesting. So was it Reagan who did away with the asylums?
Everyone says that. It wasn't Reagan. It was years before Reagan.
Who was it?
I don't remember specifically so what happened was, in this country, we had insane asylums, and they were doing all kinds of pretty terrible shit. Yeah. And so eventually people were like, hey, this is terrible. We're going to shut these places down. And the idea at the time was your community will provide, like, instead of sending every crazy person in Texas to one big hospital, Austin will have a hospital, Houston will have a hospital, Dallas will have a hospital, and they'll be smaller and more easy to manage. And that was the idea. Well, no one did that. So now I think in Texas we have two. We have Ash and we have one other one.
So was that federally regulated, or was that just like, hey, states, you deal with this situation?
I think it was originally I don't know if it was the states or the feds, but they got rid of the insane asylums. And this was back when you could basically have your wife committed if she was too annoying.
Don't put ideas in my head.
But so like it was a little bit sketchy back then. I think they threw the baby out with the bathwater in that situation,
right?
And now we have the problem we have now.
So you went from dealing with gun violence and traumatic well, I think they're all traumatic situations, but you dealt with that situation in Oakland, and then coming to Austin, it was mostly dealing with drunk people. Was that?
Yeah. So Austin is a healthy city. So you don't get a lot. So in Oakland, it was wild medical calls, like people who's, I would run on people who would have heart rates in the 20s, or they'd be in severe cardiogenic shock. Real sick people, and you have the violence. And then I came here, and everyone's healthy. There's like very few like medically unhealthy people. I mean, there are plenty, don't get me wrong, but not like it was there. And there was very little violence when I first got here. Yeah. I think up until like 2019, I would run a couple of GSWs a year.
Let me guess. Gunshot wounds? And
they were always self-inflicted. They were never like in anger. Yeah. And then COVID kicked off somehow. Now, by the time I retired, it was like I was running gunshots very regularly, like gunfight gunshots.
Here in Travis County?
Here in Austin, yeah.
Okay, wow.
And that was a recent, that has spiked over the last 5 years for sure.
What do you think is the cause of that?
I think population grows, right?
Yeah, sure.
Markets expand. You bring in more drug dealers. There is like gang related drug violence. But also I think people just got like wound up
right
over COVID, and it did something to this country. I don't know what it was, but
yeah. So kind of going off a different tangent, gun violence. That has always been, I feel like it's always been prominent here in America because of our Second Amendment. And then there is this call to ban those guns that cause the most destruction. What do you do to subdue the violence? What do you do to subdue the mass shootings without infringing upon the Second Amendment?
I think probably mental health. We don't really treat it like, it's like I said, it's like you don't walk around, and if you're walking down the road and you saw a 15-year-old kid sitting on the sidewalk holding their arm with a bone sticking out, you would be like, hey, you want me to call 911? You need help? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like, people would act. They would call. They would do things. We would take them to the hospital. They would set the bone, sew them up. You really wouldn't take no for an answer, right? I would convince that person to go to the hospital. We don't really treat the mental health the way it should be. I think it's getting better and people are kind of getting hip to it, but that's kind of the key. And I think people need, you have to A, not be crazy, and then B, have meaning, and C, have skin in the game. You need to be part of no one has any, like in Israel, everyone's got to be in the army, and in a lot of countries in Europe, there's
Korea too. Yeah.
There's things. I always thought, in this country, I get it. You don't want to be in the military. You don't want to be part of, maybe you're a pacifist, whatever. That's fine. So there should be some kind of service though, like requirement for a young man and woman. Maybe it's be an EMT for a year, or a fireman, or something where you are part of society. You're here to help your fellow, citizens or whatever, and get some skin in the game, and have some pride in your country, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. There's two things that I learned in working for a firearms company. I worked for a company called Silencer Shop, and they tasked me with interviewing some individuals who made silencers. And one of the guys who made silencer, Mike Pappas, he was like, yeah, my daughter is going to go to a convenience store, so that way she learns how to deal with people and individuals and
Sure.
humans. I'm like, that's a great idea. And the other thing I learned about is the idea of gun control. And the first gun restrictions were placed on black people way back when our country was born. And so when I hear the idea of let's ban these weapons, my initial thought was like, whoa, wait a minute, hold on. You might want to ban the weapons out of the hands of, white people. What you forget is that, hey, black people are proud 2A supporters as well. And I don't think that's going to go over the way you think if we just remove the item for someone who just got the ability to practice their Second Amendment, because this country is very young. Yeah. And we banned, if we ban whatever weapon, then how does that reflect upon, black people, minorities who just got the right to use their firearm? So I don't agree with the idea that let's ban this weapon. But to your point, it is very easy to ban said weapon, but the hard aspect is addressing the mental health issue, which yeah. I agree with you. Like, yeah. There's no on paper it sounds easy, but how do you address that? Like, you can't. And so I think that's a very interesting way in getting people yeah. into like, hey, let's understand this situation.
I think you can address it. It just takes some balls, and and
it has to show like it has to show a success rate yeah. very quickly.
I love personal weapons. I'm sort of like I'm an anti-war, pro-violence guy.
Okay.
Right? So I don't like industrial warfare. I wouldn't want to go to another country and shoot somebody I don't know
right.
for someone else's reason. But I got no problem with shooting someone for my reason.
Right.
And so there's always these arguments like, well, guns cause, it's because the availability of these firearms, that's what's doing it, right?
And there's some truth to that.
There's absolutely yeah. truth. So used to be we used to have propane for ovens. You ever head in the oven, that old
yeah,
thing?
Yeah.
So people used to kill themselves by putting their head in the oven, turning the gas on, and they would breathe it and die. And there was this huge rate of suicides. And so they banned this gas, and they went to LP gas or whatever they went to. This was back in the day. I think it was in England, actually. And the rate of suicide dropped completely. And they're like, okay, so you could carry that logic forward. You'd be like, okay, people shoot themselves. So let's ban guns. And guess what? People shooting themselves will drop dramatically. But is that addressing the problem? I don't think so, because why did they want to kill themselves? These women were at home alone. They were lonely. They're just like, fuck it, put my head in the oven. Yeah. Now that thing isn't there. It's not easy to kill yourself. Well, you're still miserable at home alone. And what did they do? They had to do something else. So they, you have the women's movement, and you have, going out and getting jobs or whatever it is. And, that has its own side effects. But like, we could probably have that old gas and not suicide, right? And I don't like, I don't want to fix people getting hit by cars by getting rid of cars.
Right.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't want to fix gun violence by getting rid of guns, because I think, and I really do think this, and I think COVID was a great example when you looked at other countries and how they handled it. The fact that we're an armed society means that the government can't just come along and tell us what to do and become like Australia or whatever and get out of control. And I think that's more valuable than, not having it.
Right. And in your instance, all the positive that all the lives that you saved throughout your career here in Austin, how would you explain that to a politician? Like,
well, first of all, politicians are all cunts. You have to be if you want to be a politician. That's it. I mean, maybe in the beginning you had some ideals and some backbone. Yeah. But the minute you get up in there, it's like becoming an officer or a chief at my department. Like you immediately become a bastard, right, when you become management. And I don't know what to tell them, except you got to you have to understand the game. And if you want these people to do what you want them to do, you have to motivate them so that they think it's in their best interest to do that. And however you run that grift, you figure it out. I don't know.
Now, we did see not a camping ban, but we relieved the banning of people camping at downtown city council, or no,
City Hall.
City Hall. There you go. That's the word. What did you notice during that time period as the ban was lifted?
When they let everyone camp?
Yeah. Did your services become much more required?
Yes, only because regular people would drive around, and all those dudes that used to live in the woods were now on the sidewalk. And they would, so you would drive around and you would see somebody and you would call 911. And I don't know why they were calling 911. I don't know if they honestly were like, this person, driving by was like, oh my God, that person looks like they really need help. I'm going to call 911. Or did they think, this is annoying me, I want them to go away, so I'm going to generate a 911 call to try to raise awareness? I don't know what it was, but our call volume went through the roof. And it was drive-by callers, what we call them. So people drive by, they call, they're not with the person, and they would call. And half the time we'd show up and they're like, I don't want you, I'm just laying here, and that's fine. And it's not illegal, so we just walk away. Yeah.
So that lift impacted impacted demand, essentially, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We would be. So I'll tell you a story. I'm sitting downtown, and it's probably 10 at night, and we're on one of these drive-by calls. Someone saw a homeless guy, and he was just laying on the sidewalk without a shirt on, and they were like, maybe he's dead. So we all go, and usually, I get there, the guy's not dead, he's fine, he doesn't want us. I'm sitting in the ambulance, I'm just finishing up paperwork, and I see a cardiac arrest drop at like right around the corner at a bar. Now, 10 o'clock at night, a bar, cardiac arrest, unlikely. I'm thinking this is probably bullshit. I'm just looking at the call text. Then they dispatch an ambulance to it, because I'm technically on a call right now. They can't dispatch me. And the ambulance they dispatch is coming from 2222 and Balcones, that intersection up there. There's a station up there.
Yeah, yeah.
They're sending that ambulance because everyone else is on a bum sleeping on the sidewalk somewhere. And I started looking at the call text, and I'm like, this actually might be real. So I just got on the radio. I was like, hey, we'll take that. We're around the corner. So we go. This young gal was on a mechanical bull, and she was dead on the floor. And so everyone's like, oh, she must have fallen off and died. And I'm like, that's weird. Her friend shows me a video, and she's on the bull, and then she just sort of passes out while on the bull. She hasn't had anything to drink, maybe one drink, nothing major. Good kid. Like, she was starting like the police academy the next day in some town. But because we were around the corner, because we could get there so fast, we got her back. I think she coded again in the hospital, but they got her back. She ended up living. She ended up going to the police academy. She came to our station to meet us. Real sweetheart. But the only reason that girl's alive is because I was watching the screen and thought, maybe this is real. And I saw the other ambulance coming from far away, and I was like, okay, I could have just sat there and not run that call. I could have just gone back to the station. And those guys come from 2222, she would have been dead for, 12 minutes before they got there. And that's your ass at that point.
What do you think, was it experience? Like, hey, because this is kind of odd. That's the only reason why you went to that.
Yeah. I mean,
job.
So I got good at,
patient?
So one of the things I tell new people, what's called call text, it comes up on the computer. Like, it's what the caller is stating and what the dispatchers tell us. I'm very good. It's almost always wrong, but I'm very good at telling if it's a real call or not. There's a few things. I don't know. It's just years of experience. So I can look at it and be like, it'll be like, oh, this is a priority nothing, and it's just a little head cold. And I'll look at some of the things people are saying. I'm like, no, this is bad. We better go. And that's just years and years and years of watching the computer.
How do we duplicate you?
Well, more guys and gals will sign up for this dumb job. And
well, so if there's, I talked to my sister about this, who is a kindergarten teacher in California, and I asked her, like, how do we get more qualified teachers like herself? Because she had it in her mindset to become a doctor of education, to get her doctorate's degree, and become a great teacher for her students. And I feel like that's a great duty, not only for her students, but for society. How do you incentivize people to come into these really important jobs for the functioning of society? Meanwhile, we're paying, as we're doing this podcast, we're paying millions of dollars to NFL athletes who have a short career of 3 years. Like, how do we transition that? How do we get people to really understand the importance of paramedics, of teachers, of all these individuals that are necessary for a thriving society?
To be perfectly honest, I don't know how it is for cops, and fire seems to be a sustainable career. And it's a desirable one
because they get paid to do nothing. No,
yeah, they hang out, they play a lot of Xbox. No,
my buddy's a cop, and he's like, dude, all those fire guys, they just sit at the house and do nothing and lift.
Firemen are, I fucking love firemen. There is nothing better when you need some motherfuckers and those guys show up. You are happy,
right?
When you need them. When you don't need them. Yeah, we shit on them. They just play Xbox.
Just barbecuing outside the firehouse.
And working out. Yeah. And they're all good looking. Yeah, no.
Making my wife take a double look? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's bullshit. But, man, when you need them, nothing better than some firemen. Paramedics, I think, is here's what you want. If you're fucked up, you want like a 6-7 year guy. You don't want to.
What's the age range?
Doesn't matter. As long as they've been a paramedic for about 6-7 years, that's the sweet spot. You go over that, you got burnout, you got guys cutting corners. They're not maybe doing. Now, there's always exceptions. There's guys that have been paramedics 25 years that are still phenomenal paramedics. And there's guys that are real good right out of the gate. But in my experience, you kind of peak at that 7-8 years. And then it's like you plateau or you drop off. And I think it's not a career. It's not a real career. Most places. In Austin, it kind of is because they pay you really well and they have good benefits. But it's exhausting. You're up all night. It's a young man's game. I mean, I'm 47, and I'm in pretty good shape. I can do all kinds of things, and it is brutal on me.
Yeah.
So most paramedics are not like me. Most paramedics are 50 pounds overweight. A healthy alcohol problem, They're, I'm only on wife 2. Usually paramedics are on 3 or 4 at this point. It's a disaster job. If you're going to do this job, you have to go in with your eyes open. You have to know, you have to meal plan. You have to bring your own food. You have to get a cooler. You have to put on the ambulance, because you are never going to see your station, and the firemen can cook dinner. They can do all those things. The cops can go out of service and get a decent meal, not paramedics. So all you end up doing is you get lazy. You don't make meal prep. So now what's your option? It's got to be fast food, or else you're not going to get your food before you get your next call, or you're eating trash hospital food. And then you're going home self-medicating because you're tired, you're stressed. So you booze, you're not working out. It's a terrible job unless you are very disciplined.
So what I'm hearing is like the city pays for meal preps that we just give to all the first responders, and then you get a discount at some healthy food store.
I think EMS management is shit the bed. They are now. I love my department. I love all the people I worked with. They're some of the greatest people I've ever known. Leadership in EMS is dog shit. These people are completely disconnected. These are the people who didn't want to run calls, were scared of running calls. So they went to management. They go to an office, and then they go up through the ranks quickly from the office, and they become chiefs, and they don't understand what it's like. They're very disconnected from the field, from the guys working. And if I was in charge, I think one of the things I would institute immediately is some kind of rotational schedule where you are guaranteed 45 minutes to go back to your station, get some food, 3 times a day, a proper meal. And if I could work it in, I would have some kind of on call, or you could maybe staff it with overtime or whatever. Guys that would come in for 8-hour shifts and just cover units so they could go out of service and do a workout or something. You got to bring that health part into the job, and they just don't do that.
Yeah, because if you're not healthy as a professional who's taking care of other individuals, then how are we expected as a society for you to do your job properly? If you're so inundated with taking care of the 40 to 50 hour work week of your service, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
What was the longest, what were your work shifts like? How long were they?
Most recently, Austin does a 24 on, 72 off rotation. Okay. So it's pretty sweet. You work for 24 hours, but then you're off 72 hours. It used to be 20. So it used to be a 56-hour work week, and then it went to a 48-hour work week, and now it's a 42-hour work week, which it works out to with the 24/72. Because it's just so busy. You're never getting downtime on a 24-hour shift. Right. And guess what? They've done studies. After 16 hours, you're impaired. So what have I had?
For sure.
I've had 3 beers. Well, 2 beers.
2 beers. Yeah.
About to open this 3rd one. And if I'm running a call on you at 4 a.m., it's equivalent to 4 or 5 of these beers. And that's real, man. If you're going to have a heart attack in this city, you want to do it around noon.
All right, I'll be sure to note that when I have my
fresh guy just got on shift at 10. Already took his shit. He's warmed up. He's ready to go. Right around noon, 1 o'clock. That's when you want to get hurt.
Okay, so one of my sisters, my only sister, she is part of the DLI. I think it's Dual Language Initiative. So she's teaching Spanish first because she's in a poor economic part of California, and they mostly speak Spanish. So because she is teaching predominantly in Spanish, the scores of her test have been elevated to a significant level. So they're showing success rate, and because they implemented this program, obviously things are going well for them. And that makes me feel good, because if you improve the education system of a part of a poor economic, county, then I feel like that's going to improve just the overall livelihood of that, that area. So what are some things that when you left, what were some glimmers of hope that the paramedics were doing? Or what were some,
glimmers of hope? Well, so there is, in 2008, we had that housing mortgage crisis, everyone was like, oh,
Yeah.
I lost my job, whatever.
Yep.
And they started looking at public safety because, wow, you get a pension. It's guaranteed money. You're not going to get fired, not going to
Yeah.
get laid off. So we got a lot of like pretty smart. Before then, it was a working class job. It was, a blue collar deal. Now we have, when I started at Austin in 2012, there were more advanced degrees at the EMT level than there were at the chief level. So those people have filtered up now. So now, we used to have like district commanders that were, had GEDs and stuff. Yeah. Now we have people with master's degrees that have filtered up, and now they're starting to become chiefs. Most recently, we had a new one of our commanders got made a chief, and she is fluent in Cantonese, Persian, English. She's super smart. I have hope that these people are going to now filter up into leadership positions and actually make a real impact. I think that's what's going to happen. I'm hopeful for it. It is a good job, and it can be an awesome job if these people are allowed to be creative and do what they're going to do.
Talk to me about when you're in the thick of it in Oakland, and you, I don't know, 1 or 2 years in. Talk to me about your day-to-day like you walk into work, and then when you leave work. Talk to me about that.
You walk into work, and a certified scumbag gives you the keys to an ambulance and a pager and a radio, and then you go running around Oakland trying to dodge calls, trying to get food, trying not to get killed, and then you go. So there was one ambulance. So in Oakland, in California, they have Opticon, which is
before you go into that, you can't glaze over. Try not to get killed. What does that look like from trying not to get killed point?
That means like certain areas of town you're going to go to because you got to run calls there. Yeah. I'm talking about areas of town where there's like 2 dead cars in the driveway with like pit bulls chained to them, and kids that just circle your ambulance on bicycles, and everyone's looking at you, and you're like, oh, God damn it. I hope they don't murder me for my narcotics.
Right.
That's what I mean by that.
All right. Continue on. Sorry for interrupting.
But at the end of the day, there was one unit, and I forget the number of the ambulance, but I would always try to get it because in California, when you put on your code 3 lights, it's one switch, and that switch turns on Opticon, which is an infrared light that no one can see, but it makes the traffic lights turn green for you.
I think I saw that in a Transformer movie.
Yeah, we don't. That's Optimus Prime. No, these are Opticons, and they don't have them here. You just have to wait the red light. In California, but one of the ambulances had a separate button for that function. It wasn't tied to the code 3 lights, so you could turn them on, and no one would see them because they're infrared. And you could turn all the lights green when you weren't driving code 3. Okay. So you want that ambulance, because if you're 5 miles from your base and you're trying to get off shift, you don't want to get hit on a call, and it's traffic. It's California, right? So I flipped the Opticon on, and I'm green lights all the way home. So that was how my day would end. And then I would go. Back then, we didn't work 24s, or I didn't work them. There was like 12s and 16-hour shifts and 24-hour shifts, and I worked 12s.
Holy crap.
And so I would get off at 10 at night. I used to go 10A to 10P, and I would then go to a bar, kind of diner bar place in Emeryville with my partner, and tie one on, and then I'd go to bed.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 12-hour days, but I'm just like, here, this is my 12-hour day.
Yeah.
TV, couch, gym.
Perfect.
It's pretty easy. Yeah. I don't know what you guys are complaining about.
Yeah, right. Fucking pussies.
What was a gnarly story that you can tell from Oakland that really that has a somewhat of a happy ending? Because I know there's a lot of bad shit that happened in Oakland. Oh, so there's a lot of happy endings. No. Oh,
very few happy endings in that town. Gosh. Man, I really can't think of. I mean, we had some funny calls, some nonsense.
Let's talk nonsense. What was a nonsense story?
People will call you. I went on it came out as a water rescue, and I was confused because it was a home address.
Oh,
and I drove to the house.
Okay, go.
And the lady, her riser from her water line to her sink had broken and was spewing water everywhere. And there was about a half-inch of water in her kitchen. And that's what we got dispatched to.
Lady, I have a number for a plumber. Here you go.
I turned her water off, and then she says, what should I do? And I said, you could call a plumber, or you could go to Home Depot and get a riser. And just, if you have a crescent wrench, you can just put it in. And then you won't have to pay, $500, whatever a plumber's going to charge you.
Did that moment lead you to getting your contractor's license as well?
No, okay. I didn't. But I mean, stuff like people will call. I had a guy call because he literally stubbed his toe when he was going to the bathroom.
Dude, that hurts, man. Like, I do it all the time.
It hurts. I get it.
Like, I want to call my wife. I'm like, hey, I know you're knee deep in some poop right now, but I just stubbed my toe. What should I do? She's like, Ramon, fuck off.
You should probably call 911. I had a guy call, and I said he was sitting out front of his house when I got there, and I was like, is he crazy? Like, what's going on with this dude? He's like, no, he showed me his toe. It was bruised. And I go, did you want to go to the hospital? And he goes, do you think I need to? And I said, no. And he was like, okay, I'll stay home. I was like, great. And I left.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Was there any resuscitation where you brought people back to life in Oakland?
Oh, yeah, plenty. Yeah. It actually happens less frequently than people think. I think they did like some kind of study in New England Journal of Medicine or something like that, where it was like on television,
those
CPR.
New Englanders, they don't know anything.
Yeah. On television, CPR has like a 90% success rate. And in reality, it has like a 8% success rate.
Well, I took all those classes, Will. Why?
Yeah, so people's expectations are a little off when it comes to doing CPR.
But I've heard a fireman who was actually a wedding photographer. He told me like when he'd done it 3 times, and he was able to revive one person, but all 3 times he crushed their rib cage.
You do. You crush you break all the ribs. Especially like when a 240-pound fireman starts doing CPR on a 90-pound old lady who's got like it's just crunch. You're like, oh, it's all squishy. We've had, I've done, I don't remember how many cardiac arrests I've been on. I don't know, tons. I've done CPR a million times. You do get them back. And it's cool when you do, especially if they actually walk out of the hospital.
Yeah.
That's always nice. Young people, obviously that girl, she was 21 at the bar.
Sure, yeah.
That was super rewarding. I had a mom with teenage daughters, die in her house, and we got her back in front of the kids. It's like stuff like that. It's like that's kind of you ride that high for a few years.
Yeah, it keeps you going.
Stuff. But man, it's not as tragic or as people think. It's mostly funny. You have a lot of fun on the ambulance. A lot of laughing. You got to be able to compartmentalize because you're going to run on a kid. There's going to be a dead baby, a burned up kid, whatever it is. And that's when it's the hardest because especially if you have kids. So if you have a 5-year-old and you run on a dead 5-year-old, you're going to have a real problem not putting your kid's face on that kid. But that's where I think, I didn't train. I didn't learn anything. I just am able to do it.
Right.
And some people can and some people can't. And that's just the way it is, I think.
So now let's go to Austin. What are are there any happy stories here in Austin that you remember or funny or, anything that is memorable?
God, I like when we first got ketamine as a pain drug. I had a 15-year-old kid who was skateboarding in Tarrytown, and he wrecked, and his femur was broken right in the middle, called a mid-shaft femur fracture, and so his leg was turned sideways that way, and this is an incredibly painful. This is an incredibly painful thing, and what I have to do is I have to make your leg straight. And we had just gotten ketamine, and at the time it was a brand new drug, and we were trying it out with rescue. I was on rescue, And so I call the doc and I go, hey, I got this kid with a sideways leg. I'm going to give him ketamine.
Now, when you're calling him, is it on the radio? Is it on the cell phone?
Okay. You call the doc, like our medical director, I call on the phone.
Okay, so he's able to answer on the, because he's on call, right?
Yeah, they're always.
It's not going to go to voicemail.
No. It'll always be answered. And I know that this doc is cool. And he knows me, and it's easier when you know each other because he doesn't have to ask me a lot of questions if he knows I know what I'm doing. I say, hey, 15-year-old, real bad broken leg. I want to give ketamine. He's like, go for it.
Do you have to like give body weight? Like he's about 130 pounds?
No, I mean, I'll do that calculation. Okay. It was just a brand new drug, so they wanted a little more control. Now we can just give it whenever we want.
Okay.
So I fire this kid up with some ketamine, and he goes from like clearly in excruciating pain. His mom's there, she's freaking out, and then suddenly he just stops and he looks at one of the firemen and he just starts talking about skateboarding and different shit. And the mom goes, when will it work? And I'm like, I think it's working. And I just took his leg and I pull it straight, and he doesn't bat an eye. He just keeps talking about surfing or whatever the hell he's talking about. And I was like, I am sold on this drug. This is fantastic.
Is it addictive? Like
ketamine? No.
Okay.
It's a dissociative drug like LSD.
Okay.
And you can't really overdose on it. Like you won't kill you. You'll just get even higher. It's dangerous actually to underdose people because they'll have something called an emergence reaction where they'll freak out. It's like having a bad trip.
Okay.
And the cure to that is just give them more.
Interesting.
But it got a bad rap because that thing in Colorado where that guy died. So people have died, but it's not the ketamine. It's positional asphyxiation typically because they're usually having like they call it used to be called excited delirium, and it was like a stimulant overdose. But you're not allowed to call it that anymore because it's racist or something. I don't know. And but it's never the ketamine that kills them.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they were in a fight with the police for 25 minutes and they're not in good shape.
Yeah.
And they're basically in rhabdo now, like a elite athlete would be, and their kidneys shut down. Right. And we sedate them with ketamine. It doesn't affect your breathing really. But that process that happened while they were in the fight continues. The ketamine doesn't cure your rhabdo, so your kidneys still shut down and you still die. You die of hyperkalemic arrest. There's ways, if you're a good medic, you can see it happening, and those guys in Colorado did make mistakes, like bad mistakes, and they shouldn't have done that, but it is what it is.
So real quick, run down a list of occupations throughout your life now.
Okay.
Start from the beginning.
Milkmaid, field hand, construction, plumber. I worked on a plantation in Australia for a while.
That's racist.
It was super racist. Cutting sugarcane, picking capsicum. I was blacktopping, worst job you can ever have, doing blacktopping. Waiting tables, terrible. Bartending I liked. I was a radio board operator at a radio station, and I produced a radio show. And I was in college, and also I make knives. And
senior work, it's beautiful.
I'm a helicopter rescue swimmer and technical rescue guy and a paramedic, and hopefully soon to be PA. Okay,
before we get into the PA work, because I didn't know you needed a degree to be a personal assistant. One of the things that I've been very fortunate. I haven't lost anyone of significance to me to death. Mm-hmm. I'm very lucky in that. My parents are 83, soon to be 84, and they're alive. They're doing well. All my friends are still with me. Aunts and uncles, they're still with me. So my view of death, in my mind, it's like it doesn't really exist. But the big part of me that I go to therapy for is like, it's going to happen. I don't know when, but something is going to happen. So how do you view death?
It's
how do you deal with
inevitability?
It is.
And
right.
I've been around it my whole adult life, and I am comfortable with it. It's natural. It's part of life, man. We're all going to die. I think if I'm not some Zen dude, but I do think that you have to enjoy the time you're in and not worry so much about the future and all that. I mean, obviously you have to think about that to be a responsible person, but when you have a moment that's an enjoyable moment, like, have a really good cheeseburger or whatever it is, that's the second that you have to take a minute and be like, oh, this is good. And there'll be bad times. There'll be times when I'll be upset and I'll be sad or angry. And this happiness, it's all happiness, right? Whether it's you won the lottery or you got a big cheeseburger or you got married or you had a kid, whatever it is, you have to enjoy that moment and live in that moment and be aware of it and just be kind of grateful for it, I guess, because, some bullet somewhere's got your name on it, or car or cancer or something.
It's funny that you mentioned cheeseburger, because last night I made I made a double cheeseburger for myself, and it was after a long day. And I'm like, you know what? The only thing I want to do right now while I'm working a job at Central Machinery, I just want to go home. I want to make myself a cheeseburger. That's what I'm looking forward to. And I had a good time working, and then I came home, I made the cheeseburger, and I'm like, this is life. This is good. This is what I want out of my life. And I could be like, the world could be burning outside, but this hamburger that I made myself, in which I bought with my own money that I made through my company, I'm like, okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So going on into being a physician's assistant, or assistant to the physician.
Assistant to it's actually physician assistant. Physician's assistant.
One of my wife's good friend is a physician's assistant, and I made that joke to her, like, oh, you're going to be a personal assistant, and she's like, fuck you,
it's the worst name for the job.
It really
ever.
Because it doesn't do it justice.
Yeah, it's completely.
What is the job entail?
A PA is a mid-level practitioner, so think nurse practitioner. So you have you can do, depending on your specialty, there's surgical PAs, there's primary care PAs, there's EMS PAs now. You can do an enormous amount. So say you have, how many times have you been to the doctor because you got like an infection or strep throat or something, right? Something obvious.
Yeah.
And you go to the doctor, and if you don't have insurance, it's like, oh, it's $350 to see the doctor and get zithromycin for something that is very normal, or get some stitches, or, there's an enormous array of things that is not very complicated, but you need someone with some training that can do it, and you don't necessarily need a doctor. That's that mid-level practitioner, and that's what's going to be the cure for like expensive, like the expense of healthcare, right? You need these guys. We probably, they always say we need more doctors. We probably need less doctors and more PAs and nurse practitioners,
and more nurses, like my wife,
and nurses, because you can handle, like, you can go see a PA and get a prescription. They can prescribe medications. They can do simple procedures.
You don't. Procedures. Hey, Will, you're going to be very handy in my.
I'm going to open one of those like testrone dick pill.
Oh, hell yeah,
and
dude.
Just fucking
getting jacked and raging hard boners.
Make some serious money. Although if you go to Ageless Men's or something, it's all PAs in there. There's no doctors.
What made you want to pursue this line of work now?
Freedom of movement.
Okay.
So with EMS, I'm a paramedic in Austin, right? This is probably arguably the best possible place you could be a paramedic. The system, the pay, the benefits, everything about the system, there really isn't another one like it in the country. So say I wanted to move to like West Virginia. Well, I would have to go to some EMS service there and be a paramedic there and make $11 an hour and just hate myself. So I realized that I need to be, I don't want to be a paramedic forever. It's a really physically unhealthy job. It's a demanding job, and
mentally unhealthy as well.
But my whole career has been medicine. So what do I do? Like, I don't want to be a doctor either, because that's 8 years, and I'm too old for that shit. So,
and doctors are assholes.
and they're just arrogant. No, I like most doctors. So PA was like, okay, well, I have a college degree and it's a graduate program. I didn't do any science classes in college. I was all journalism. But so I had to go back to college and do like biology and chemistry, which was hilarious.
When I went to Texas State, biology was like a prerequisite before I got into my journalism class.
Like a distribution requirement?
Yeah.
We had a science, but I took astronomy because it was like, and then that was like, I thought that was going to be easy. And I was like, oh shit.
You really want to study what it means to be an Aries and Sagittarius?
Yeah, not that kind of, but it was actually pretty hard. And I was like, fuck. So I dropped that class. And then I ended up doing, geology, which was nicknamed Rocks for Jocks. Cause it was like the science class for like the athletes that didn't really, and that was something I could, basically not go to class and pass. So that's what I did for my science requirement in college.
Okay. How's it been so far in regards to studying for being a PA?
It's been weird being 47 and being in like freshman level classes. Like I did.
Oh my God! You're the old guy walking in.
Oh yeah, they're so confused when I sit at a chair. They're like, "Oh, professor's here." No.
Meanwhile, the professor is 25, 30.
I'm older. I was older than both of my professors last semester, but it's been fun. These kids are hilarious, and they're kind of, I don't know, they're interesting. I guess it's because I'm in science classes. They're all nerds.
What?
But it's been good, man. I enjoy it. I actually like science and math. I was always pretty good at it. I just never pursued it, you know.
One of the things that I've only had one. Well, I've had two dads on this episode. So, what's it like being a father? I guess. What was it like day one being a father?
So they say women become moms when they get pregnant, and men become dads when the baby's born. I would say men become dads when the baby can exist without the mom. Like, because for the first like 9 months, you can't. The mom's got to be around. They need the titty and they need whatever. So you don't really become a dad until the kid can start being a kid, really.
Yeah.
And then being a dad gets cooler and cooler as they get older. And I think being a dad's probably great when your kids grow up and become like moms are kind of get a shitty deal because they sort of
house them for 9 months.
Yeah, they do this whole thing and they're really useful when they're young, but you know, when you become a teenager, you know, who's going to give you the keys to the car? It's dad. Who's going to give you money? Dad. You know, in the general way it goes, right? So you get to be the parent longer, I think, than the mom does in a real sense. So I like it.
Was there anything you had to sacrifice when you first had your kid?
Like, no, I kept doing whores, drugs. It was all there, no problem. Some people give that shit up, but not me, man.
Oh, you're not a quitter.
No.
That's right. Mom didn't raise a quitter.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you're living for someone else now. So
how do you my thing is I love golf. I love the game of golf. That's my thing. That's what I go to, where I spend 4 to 6 hours a time at a round. And granted, some of it is involved with drinking, but I'm dedicated to the game because I want to get better and I want to pursue it. And my idea of like having a kid, I'm like, that is the one thing that I have to give up. So how do you come to that?
Well, first of all, why do you have to give up golf?
No, that valid point. But
I mean, how many times a week do you play?
I was when the weather allows for it. I don't like golfing in
say it's beautiful out. How many times a week?
We're talking summertime, at least. Well, 3 rounds a week plus driving range time. So that's like driving range could be 4 to 5 days out of the week because it's.
And how long is a round of golf?
A round typically. Don't tell my wife this, but 4 to 5 hours. But
okay, so you might have to go to like 2 rounds or 1 round and 1 driving range session in the beginning because your wife's going to need a break. So you're talking like 4 years.
Okay.
Where you're actually going to be in it, really in it.
Yeah.
Then they're going to be in. They're going to go to daycare, or preschool, whatever they're going to go to.
Okay.
And then you're off and running again. So, I was the same way. I like to do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And mine were not like golf. It was quite literally getting hammered, drunk, and doing whatever.
That's fun. Well, that's why I play golf. Don't tell my wife again.
Well, right.
She's never going to watch this episode. But yeah, that's why.
You can do those things, but you just have to do it slightly less in the beginning, and you can go right back to doing it all the time.
That's right. And then you get to bring them along when they become of age to drive, and then you could just get hammered on the golf course. They could drive you back home.
They can drive you back. But here's the thing about kids is they're not, no matter how cool the thing is you're into,
they don't give a shit.
They're not into it.
Yeah.
I jump out of helicopters. I make knives.
Which is the coolest thing ever.
I do jujitsu. I do all kinds. My son doesn't give a shit about any of it. He's like, oh, neat, Dad. Like, look at.
Yeah, but are you on TikTok, Dad? Oh, well.
Yeah, no one's
Little
on
do you
TikTok.
know, son.
Yeah.
About to, yeah.
So
about
it's
to ruin
funny,
your
man.
world.
When I was a kid, if my dad did the shit I do, I would have been like, dude, that's awesome. But I guess they say you give birth to your shadow. I guess that's what it is.
Okay, my last question is in regards to sleep when you are a father. Like, how do you manage that? Because yesterday, my wife had a weightlifting competition, and we woke up. I had a late night because I was working. I came home, and then I was in bed by midnight, and then we had to wake up at 4 a.m. I was exhausted after her weightlifting competition. Like, I came home, I thought I was going to work out. I thought I was going to work. That was not the case. I slept on the couch. I'm like, it fucking buried me just for being like awake for that short period of time. How do you deal with that no sleep concept when it comes to becoming a father?
So you get used to it. That's all I can say.
That's exactly what all my buddies say. You just fucking wear it, Ramon. That's it.
You kind of just have to eat that shit.
That shit burger.
Like that's just what you got to eat. You get used to it. I'll say that. Everyone gets an easy one. Maybe your first one will be an easy one that sleeps. And then the other thing is don't let your wife pump, because if there's milk in the fridge, you got to get up and feed that baby. But if she doesn't pump, then when that kid starts crying in the middle of the night, you don't have milk.
It's just a nudge to the...
You're like, baby, gotta take care of that baby. Also, you could become a fireman or paramedic, and then you come home from shift, and your wife doesn't know. Maybe you slept all night on shift. And you'd be like, oh, babe, we ran calls all night. I'm so tired. I just need, and it was terrible. There was so many dead babies. And they're like, oh, you poor thing. You take a rest, and then you can run that game. So there's ways.
All right. Well, I don't think I would become a fireman because that test is pretty hard to take. And
no, you can be retired.
Really?
You can be a fireman.
Okay. Man, I think I would be a policeman, if anything. Like that
No
seems
way.
fun.
You risk your freedom every day.
Well, Will, that has been a complete hour and then some. Anything else you want to say before this gets posted to the internet?
I did not have sexual relations. No, it's all good. This has been fun.
Good. I'm glad you had fun. All your hugging buddies that are black belts, apparently, which I didn't know until today. We were drinking pretty heavily. They admired you. They were like, yeah, he's the hottest guy ever, but also he's pretty interesting. Meanwhile, the ladies were like, what the hell are you guys talking about? It's just Will. And all these, no, like he's the hottest guy ever. But
I'm big with dudes.
I bet you are. All right, bud. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you for taking the time. And I hope you pass the test to become a physician's assistant.
Physician?
It's only
physician
one?
assistant.
All right. Well, English is my second language. So
it's like you're a physician assistant.
Physician. I hope you pass the test to become APA.
Well, if I don't, it would have been a huge waste of money because that shit's expensive.
It's write off, right? You can write it off, can't you?
Oh God, I don't know.
I hope so. I would.
Education? I don't know if you can write
Anyway.
that off.
All right, dude. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.